Hi, I'm Dave Epstein, and welcome to this edition of Growing Wisdom, back at Garden in the Woods, which is in Framingham, Massachusetts, and I'm here with Nate McCullen, and we are talking containers, specifically choosing plants to go in the containers. So this is less about design and more about what do you put in these things. So Nate, tell me about some of the containers that you've created and what plants you've used.
Well, as everybody probably knows, here at New England Wildflower Society, we use natives. Most of our natives are perennials. We also like to mix in some woody species of shrubs and trees as well. So when you're working with perennials, it's a little bit different than annuals. We obviously want strong plants. You can make a container that, say, has only one season of interest. So you might shoot for spring, you might have a summer container, you might redo it again to have some appeal for the fall. Other people will take the approach to try to have one container span an entire growing season and appeal, so that's something to think about. But when you're picking plants, you know, perennials are pretty tough. They're tougher than a lot of our annuals. One of the cues I use when I'm buying plants is looking for the ones that are performing well on the pots where you're buying them. Sometimes plants are finicky when you buy them in a quart pot or a gallon pot, but when you see that one that's doing really well, that's going to be a good indicator that it's going to be strong inside of a container as well.
So for example, here it looks like you've got some Actea, and this sort of looks like a strawberry. Why did you choose these particular varieties?
Well, I always like to have 3 different heights inside of a container. So something to fill in the space. You don't want to look at mulch or dirt in a container. You want something to bring people's eyes up, and then it's always nice to get something in the mid-story too. This Actea and this Geum down here, they kind of have a similar leaf texture which plays off of each other, which is nice. And then the violets down here, this nice silvery violet really kind of pops and pushes your eyes out. The violets happen to play off of some of the colors in the pot as well, which is something that I think people often forget. You don't want to have that color palette be off too much between your pots and your plants.
And what are some of the other containers that we have around here?
In this particular container down here, I picked out a nice cedar, which is evergreen. If we had a mild winter, this would be something that maybe could stay out on your porch all year long. I've underplanted it with some heucheras, which are just a great native perennial. Look fantastic in pots. They're really strong plants. And I've actually underplanted as a fill-in with Myanthemum canadense, which is the Canada Mayflower. Not something that people would maybe think to put in a pot, but I like to experiment, and I know that those evergreens and the Canada Mayflower occur naturally, so I wanted to play off of that natural relationship. This other container over here is a woody species. I picked a native Lonicera. It's one that we call Alabama Crimson. It's a cultivar that gets some really fantastic red flowers on it. I have a heuchera here, just as kind of a nice puffy element in the middle. Again, I've used some nice purple violets here just to bring some color in and play off the color of the container. And I've used some grasses in the back here. This is a carex that will just get some nice softer textures and also kind of achieve that little mid-level height that I talked about earlier. So sometimes, Dave, you can make a statement with a single plant. This happens to be a small container, so I didn't want to crowd it with too many species. And I decided, you know, I'm going to make a little mini ecosystem. So I mimicked a bog situation and picked out our native pitcher plant, which is Sarracenia purpurea. I put a little peat moss in there. I plugged the bottom hole so that it would retain water, just like a bog does. And I feel like this makes a statement enough. We have this beautiful flower coming up, and the pitchers are always just a fantastic thing for people to observe, especially overhead, so you can see the really cool purple veination and see how they hold water.
Nate, this is great. So a lot of different choices, and you know, one of the things that I like about containers is that you can experiment, you can see what works, and next year you can try it all over again.
Yeah, and again, what's great about perennials, Dave, is that at the end of the season or when these things start to lose appeal, you can just take them out and put them in your garden. And then the next year you can dig them up again and reuse them in another container.
Well, thanks for all the great information, and thanks for watching this edition of Growing Wisdom. For Time Warner Cable, I'm Dave Epstein.